Hi, I'm Whitney Espick, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Welcome, MIT alumni, to the MIT Forum for Equity. My name is Joe McGonigal. I'm Director of Alumni Education, and I'm glad you're able to tune in and join us today for a very special event. We're here to discuss the 2020 film Emanuel, directed by Brian Ivie. It chronicles the 2015 shooting in Charleston, South Carolina at the Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. If you haven't seen the film yet, I hope you'll be able to soon. We will welcome your questions and input during this discussion. And a reminder that conversations on equity are often difficult, and we all benefit from active listening and respectful communication. I'm pleased to be joined by Reverend Anthony Thompson, pastor of Holy Trinity Reformed Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and author of Called to Forgive, the Charleston church shooting, A Victim's Husband, and the Path to Healing and Peace. Two of the film's producers are joining us, John Shepard and Dimas Salaberrios. And finally, Ceasar McDowell, professor of Civic Design at MIT and associate department head of the Department of Urban Studies. Welcome, everybody. We've asked Professor McDowell to frame our discussion today by sharing some of his research on civil rights and peacemaking. Thank you, Professor McDowell, and welcome. Would you start us off?
I'd be glad to, Joe. First of all, I want to give a deep abiding appreciation to Reverend Thompson for his courage to remember and to speak. And thanks to John and Dimas for bringing the story to film, and to Joe and Todd for making this event possible. I was asked to speak about the film and any connections with my work. Last night I watched the film for the second time. And in all honesty, it was not how my work connects to this film, but how I, as a Black man growing up in the Black church with deep ties to the South, connects me to the story. But actually, I don't really mean story, for this isn't a story, something to be viewed or read and then packed away. It's a testament. It's a testament to what ails us, what sustains us, and what we must confront. And so what this testament evoked in me were three things: rage, affirmation, and determination. So let me say a little bit about each. Rage, that in all its horror, the murders at Emanuel were a continuation of centuries of violence towards Black people and Black communities. And the goal of that violence, in its many forms, is to silence us and strip us of our humanity and any sense of power or self-efficacy we might have. But the affirmation, it hasn't worked. We're still here, we're strong, we're getting stronger, we are and will remain here. And in part because in our struggles to be freed of the violence and practice of racism, Black people have been a moral compass for the nation. Our ability to forgive in the midst of hatred is our commitment to deny the belief in a hierarchy of human value that lets racism and the desire to distinguish the other flourish. While our ability to struggle with forgiveness sustains us, we also recognize that outside of the system of justice, forgiveness does little to free the country. And as the recent election has shown, we are a nation divided, not united. And the division has been deepened through the othering of people of color in this country. So determination. This is a little bit about maybe where my work connects. And I just want to say a little bit about it. My work focuses on addressing one simple fact in this country, that right now, we are living among the most demographically complex set of people who've ever lived together. And we have neither the infrastructure nor the processes in place that can allow that kind of public to do what a public needs to do in order for a democracy to work. And so And part of that is, what it means is that we're in some sense out of community. And I want to share something with you because for me, this is the definition of community, and I use it sometimes with democracy, that really is a cornerstone of my work. This comes from a friend of mine named Carl Moore, and he says, community exists when people who are interdependent can peacefully struggle with traditions that bind them and interests that separate them so that they can realize a future that is an equitable improvement on the past. And I hold this really because I think it's an important way for us to understand what our challenge is, right? We recognize that we are interdependent, but we actually don't have the ability to struggle with things that bind us in our lives. And there can be all kinds of things. Hatred binds us in some ways, a belief in a hierarchy of human value binds some people. Sometimes some of our religious beliefs bind us. Sometimes our sense of what meritocracy means binds us, and it keeps us from imagining something different. And our goal together, what we need to learn how to do and what we need to create processes to do and structures to do is actually struggle together, right? And struggle toward the one thing we know we can do, and that's making equitable improvements on the past. So my work has been actually working on trying to design a whole set of framework for thinking about how do you go about designing and experimenting with new civic processes. I'm not gonna bore you with the details of this, but what I do wanna point to is one thing that we're doing right now that works on one particular issue that is at the core of this, and that is a belief that right now in this country, with all the divisions we have, everyone is looking to actually be heard and have their experience in the world recognized. So we're creating this campaign that we call America's Path Forward. It has a very simple element to it, and we're just getting ready to launch it. It's a request to go out to people in the public and ask them one thing, to donate their question about the future of America. And then we ask one other question. What in your experience has led you to that question? And then we have the technology and tools to actually connect people who have similar questions and put them in dialogue with each other, facilitated dialogues. And what we have found over time is that when you do that, people find themselves in rooms with people they never thought they were going to be in rooms with, right? And when you ground it in their experience, what people begin to realize is their slice of the world and the way they're experiencing poverty, right, is connected to the way other people are experiencing poverty. And so in order to move and solve and work on these issues, we need people to be able to understand the breadth of the ways people are experiencing these things. And I can say more about this later. I can give someone more information on it if you want it. But this is our effort to try to bridge what's going on in this country, right? To kind of mend the brokenness that we have in our institutions that are keeping us separated, and we're hoping to build some new infrastructures that will connect us. Because we actually really fully believe that if without the full participation of the knowledge of those least served in the world, we cannot find peaceful, sustainable, and equitable solutions to the issues confronting the world. And that's the work we're involved in. And when I watch this film, for me, it demonstrates both two things. One, what happens when people feel disconnected, and through their disconnection, they are drawn into rage and hatred and use that. And then what happens when people feel connected and what they're able to offer in the world to relieve suffering and to provide hope.
Thank you, Professor McDowell. Let's hear from the other panelists here, and panelists, I might ask you to introduce yourselves, tell us about your role in the film, and maybe if it's very fresh, but if you have any responses to what you've heard from Professor McDowell. Reverend Thompson, could we start with you with an introduction? You're on mute.
Reverend Anthony Thompson of Holy Trinity Church, Charleston, South Carolina. My wife, Myra, was one of the people killed at Emanuel Church during the Emanuel tragedy. And this is how, with the documentary, as you know, just looking at my face, you probably know, and seeing the documentary, you know who I am. Mike, Dr. McDowell, a lot of the things you said, particularly the last thing you said, the question you asked, what happens when people don't or do feel connected? And this was demonstrated in Charleston during the Emanuel 9 tragedy. As a matter of fact, both of those questions were pretty much answered, because there were a group of people, and we're discussing this every day. As a matter of fact, I was just in a conference just last night about almost the same issue. And there were people in Charleston who wanted to just ride the city, you know, because Black people, because they felt disconnected. You know, one person was thinking, well, maybe the KKK was involved, and other people were just thinking just white people, period, were involved. And there was one particular group that just wanted, who had already brought guns and were ready to just start shooting any white person they can. But then what happened was, this particular young man, they call him Papa Smith, he found some connection through the chief of police, who was Chief Mullins at that time. He had a previous encounter with Chief Mullins and another situation where he was treated with respect as a Black man, and also was given the opportunity to give opinions about what's going on in the city as a Black man. And when Chief Mullins came to him and said, listen, give me an opportunity to handle the situation. And this young man just respected the fact that Chief Mullins respected him at another time, decided that all these guys he brought, with the guns that he brought to shoot up the city, he told everybody, put it down. We'll put everything on hold to see what Chief Mullins can do. And so that was a disconnection and a connection. The connection that I felt, that everybody else felt, was when Reverend Dimas, Pastor Dimas, Salaberrios, he came and he saw this happening. And he saw the people screaming and shouting about wanting to do something. Black Panther, you know, almost every activist who wanted to rebel. And he turned around and said, hey, let's get together and let's pray. And so his intervention was another thing that brought the connection, was another thing that connected us. And so there was a disconnection and a connection, but thank God that the connection worked better than the disconnection. And so this is one thing we have to realize, you know, as Black people, as white people, you know, is how we respond to the situation, you know, that makes the difference in where we're going to go or where we're not going to go.
Wow, I'm humbled. I'm Dimas Salaberrios, and I forgot how small sometimes Charleston is proximity-wise, because I didn't know that even Anthony knew that. I had the privilege of coming down to Charleston on Thursday, and we walked out in front of the church, and we just started to lead the ministry in front of that church for 5 or 6 days straight. And like he said, groups came ready to riot, and we would say, nope, we're gonna pray. We would tell them, this is a church, this is not what the families desire. I had a guy from the Ku Klux Klan that came down to in front of the church, and he walked over to me and put his head into my chest on national TV and started to cry and said, I am quitting the Klan. I can't do it anymore. And God was just, you know, it was one of the most powerful moments in my life, and to be able to be there. And I started to realize very quickly that, you know, the bulk of that shooting, and Anthony, you can add to this if you like, was the leadership team of the church. So there was a lot of gathering and a lot of pulling together that people were doing. But at the same time, Obama was on his way, the funerals were being prepared, court dates were going on. So it was just, I just, you know, we're humbled to be able to step in and try to bring some peace. And I was in Baltimore, fighting against the riots in Baltimore. I've been to shootings all around this nation. And Charleston is one of the only places that didn't burn. But Charleston uniquely is one of the only places that got instant justice as well. Dylan Roof is sentenced to death, you know, and that, something about that stood with me that that was really powerful.
John, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm John Shepard. I'm one of the producers, and my story is a story of disconnection from the event. I live in Southern California. When the young director that I worked with came to me and said, I want to do a movie and I want to do it about this story that happened in Charleston, South Carolina, I dismissed it outright. I said, you know, what connection do we have? It's all the way across the country. It's with a group of people that we have no ability to influence, to even gain entrance to this story. And we have no connection to it. I mean, we don't have, quote unquote, an investment there. How would we possibly get permission to tell that story? And it's kind of amazing how the faith component of this story worked, because this young director had heard the story. It had impacted him deeply on his honeymoon. He saw his wife in tears and said, what's going on? She told him the story of the forgiveness part of it. He said, you know, I hope whoever eventually tells that story doesn't leave that part out. And lo and behold, we get the opportunity. But it wasn't easy because, again, we had no connection. But this young director knew of Pastor Dimas that had been there, a first responder. He said, let's go talk to Dimas. And I said, yeah, but how are you going to get it financed? And we went to a group of people in the Northeast Connecticut, 13 families that got together on a weekend and said, we'll write a check for the whole thing. None of them any connection or involvement or people they knew from the story, but they were Christians and they felt a commitment. They felt called to invest ethically in this story, regardless of what it was about. And this is another element of the faith and my connection to it. We didn't know how this story is going to turn out, because when you do a documentary, you may set out on this road and end up way over here. And that's what happened to me. And it brings up Professor McDowell's question that he put on the screen earlier. It made me think, what's your question about the future of America? And when you make a documentary, you ask yourself questions about this, or basically you ask, what's wrong with this situation? And in this instance, I said, God, what's wrong with America? And the answer I was expecting is these people and those people, and they need to, and what invariably happens, and this is how I know it's God, is the light shines on the filmmaker and you realize what's wrong with America? I am. I need to change. I need to learn. I've got work to do in my heart. And so in many ways, the film itself is an open question asking for answers. And we don't provide those. We point to the amazing story of people like Reverend Anthony Thompson, who some chose to forgive, some chose not to, but all came together to try and make a difference. And you people gathering today, and I tell you, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity and the platform to speak, because it's evidence, again, of faith, God, influence in our country. People care, people want to make a difference, and people are realizing there's work to be done. Whose fault is it? Who's at fault? What's wrong with America? Guess what? We are, but we can also make a difference. We can change.
Thank you. Well, we'd love to hear from alumni during this chat. The Q&A is open. Questions about the film for its producers, for one of certainly a featured player in it, and Professor McDowell. Comments in the chat, questions in the Q&A as well. I've got certainly no shortage in my mind here. I'd love to hear from any of you reflections on the opening, the reception to the film, its debut last year. It was last fall, and then anything about how a pandemic has foiled plans or opened up other doors for you. It certainly brought you to us here today, and we're grateful for that. But other thoughts on the past year since the film came out. John, you're on my screen, so you might start us off.
Actually, I was going to ask John a question.
Please.
If that's okay. I think it goes to John and to Reverend Thompson. But it's this question of so when I first saw the film last year, when I first saw it, when it first was available to look at, as I said, some of the things that came up for me and the rage and a whole bunch of other things. But this question in the back of my mind is always about how much does the documentation of our suffering and our struggle actually help to move the issue, to get people to be in a different place. And so you've been going around the country showing this film, talking to people about it. And I just kind of love to hear how you're experiencing that. As someone who's worked in documentary before, much more historical, but still this issue of just this, I know the importance of documentation. I know why that's important. I know why that needs to happen. I guess my question is, how does it help? Are you seeing evidence of it really shifting and moving people in a different place?
Well, I look at metrics, of course, as a producer in 3 areas: revenue, are we generating our eyeballs seeing this film? Because if people are buying it and watching, that's one indication. Right. But also the reel itself, the documentation, does it get notoriety? And the film has won every film festival it's been in. It's got 100% reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's been celebrated at different venues, but it's not because it's a fantastic movie. It's because of the courage of the people involved and the way they were impacted. And so in addition to the revenue, in addition to this nice film for our reel, it's all about relationship. And what we've seen is change happens not in massive sweeping instances, but one heart at a time. So Dimas' story of a Ku Klux Klan member burying his head in his chest, or me showing the film to Stephen Curry or Mariska Hargitay or Viola Davis, and them saying, I'm going to put my name on this. I'm going to stand up for this. The House Majority Whip, James Clyburn, hosted a press conference, and we start to see change takes time. But it starts, like I said, in my home, in my heart. And for me, that's the biggest thing, is if I can impact one person. I'll give you one last story and then I'll turn it over to Reverend Thompson. One of our investors, a guy who hadn't financed the film, came down to see it from Buffalo. And after watching the film, he said, who's the last person you thought this film would impact? And I said, I guess you. I didn't even expect you to show up. And he said, you know what, I'm going to sponsor a screening of this at my church, Fifth Avenue First Presbyterian Church in New York City. And we're going to bring in a congregation from Queens, and we're going to sit every other person, and we're going to watch this movie, and afterwards we're going to talk about it. And we've seen pulpit swaps like that happen all across the country. And for me, that's an indication that, you know what, there's hope. And it doesn't take 70 million people. It takes one person at a time. It takes 12 people that are committed. It takes 20 of us on a Zoom that are passionate. And that's where change starts. But it's got to begin with me.
Yes. When the documentary was produced, and we were promoting the documentary, of course, I went from state to state, presenting the documentary and seeing the reactions of the people. And I'm one who looks at the heart. Every time that documentary was shown, during its actual showing, people would just cry. I mean, people would just couldn't contain themselves, couldn't even watch some parts of the documentary, because they felt and they saw, how people were hurt, by a white supremacist, you know, and the majority of these people who saw the documentary were white, and their hearts began to open, and they began to see, you know, point at themselves, because I mean, after the documentary, they would come up and speak with you, and give you a testimony about how they, you know, feel concerning their own lives, and maybe the part they may have played, or maybe the part they didn't play, and making things better when it comes to black and white relationships. I mean, is heartfelt, and some people's lives would change on the spot. Some people would come up to you. I mean, literally, after the documentary, I will be crowded with people around, asking questions about what they could do, what they could do in their community. You know, how can they change their lives, you know, to make things better where they are, and what are we doing in Charleston? And so it really is changing people's hearts and changing people's lives. I mean, I've never seen anything like it before. I mean, I'm a movie addict, you know, and but this documentary was not a movie. It was real life. That's why they call it a documentary, right? Not only was it real to life, but it was something that was like this, was the divine intervention of God himself. Because prior to it being made, talking about the young man, Brian, and Pastor Salaberrios, they came to Charleston, and they asked, you know, they inquired about what was going on. What do we want to do with this? Did we want to, you know, they were interested in making a documentary, and we tossed this thing back and forth maybe about 5 times, until Brian finally said, he gave a testimony about how his life was changed from a prior documentary that he made. And that made all the difference in the world. And from that made all the difference in the world. And we were like, yes, let's do this. And from that point on, we had the divine intervention of God himself, who made this documentary what it is. And to show people, you understand, where to help people to open their hearts, to open the hearts of the nations, you know, black and white, to see just what we're doing to each other. And so I give God the glory. I give him the glory on this, you know, because it has changed people's hearts, it's changed people's attitudes, and a lot of forums, just like this panel discussion we're having here now, is a result of the documentary. I mean, I've been on so many forums and panels, you know, across this nation, talking about this documentary and how it has affected people's lives and changed people's lives. So it is doing what God said it to do. Believe me, it's just unbelievable.
You know, I was noticing in the chat, if I can lift, Joe, do you mind if I lift up something in the chat here that I just saw?
Please
two
do.
things, but one is, and it's kind of connected to what you were just saying, Reverend Thompson. But someone was really asking, like, what are the lessons from your own experience in making the film or living through it? You know, what lessons do you have to offer, like predominantly or white institutions like MIT? You know, what's the lesson?
The lesson is that in order for us to come together on anything, regardless of, we have to look at each other and see each other, you know, and see that, yes, we're black, yes, you're white, yes, you're Mexican, yes, you're Latino. We have to.
Yeah, we lost you there for a moment.
You know, we can't leave that out. We have to recognize who we are, but at the same time, we have to, pardon me? But at the same time, we have to also, oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Keep going, Anthony.
Sorry. Okay. We you know, we have to see each other for who we are: Mexican, Latino, black, white, whatever denomination. We have to recognize that. And recognizing that, then we're admitting the fact that
yeah.
Unfortunately, I have a little
It'll be on
technical.
Dimas. Can I respond to that for a minute?
Please.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I noticed from doing this film, and when you think of institutions, is that sometimes there's a preset mode that everyone has to fall into in order to thrive as a part of something. And in the documentary, we've had from highly educated people speak to very low education, but still had great impact from their life, from their journey, from how they express themselves. And I think sometimes when it comes to Black people, Latino people, people of color, sometimes you watch the hiring that takes place is, I'm looking for someone who's sort of like me in how I move, how I function, how they dress, how they express themselves. And I think from coming from that perspective, you miss a lot of the beauty and texture of how uniquely different people are shaped and made. They may have the same degrees, able to, you know, do the job really well, but I find often it slants to, I'm gonna go for people that remind me of myself or remind me of what I look like. And I think sometimes we do a big disservice. And I think Hollywood has been really leading the way. And I rarely share that kind of sentiment with Hollywood, but they're really leading the way of, you know what, let's hire somebody young. Let's hire somebody old. Let's hire somebody Latino. Let's hire somebody that's a woman. Let's hire somebody that's gay. Let's hire somebody that's straight. Let's hire somebody that's Black. Let's hire somebody, you know, and they just giving all, they're purposely giving all these kind of shots. Now you got to deliver when you get your chance, but it widens it out where I think sometimes there's a mode of a professor or administrator that if you don't fit that mode, if you don't have that right sweater, or if you have that right look, you know, you're really not for this institution. And I'm not necessarily just talking about skin color. I'm talking about in orientation, presentation, how they express themselves. And I think we miss a lot of what, you know, I think this generation, this younger generation coming up has a better shot of doing this a lot better because many of us have been stuck in the same hiring box mode and you get the same type of person. Yeah. Anthony, you're back.
I don't know what happened. Forgive me.
It's okay.
We're having a lot of problems around here in my area with our internet.
I'm gonna call you afterwards, and I'm gonna help you with that. That's never gonna happen again.
Thank you. I appreciate. Okay, got you. Because it's terrible. But what I basically was saying was that, you know, we have to look at each other as neighbors. You know, and that's where we have to start. That's what we're doing in Charleston, and that's what we're reaching across denominational barriers. We're reaching across cultural barriers and each other's pulpit. We're letting the church take the lead where the church should have been taking the lead many years ago. You know, not the government, but the church. And so that's where you know, that's exactly where we are now. And that's the advice I give to those MIT alumni. You have to start, first of all, in your family. You know, if you can start in your family and talk about the Black and white issues in your community and in your church, your family is going to be the hardest people to change hearts and change attitudes, because we all have been stigmatized, you know, by what we learned from our ancestors before us. You know, our families, the white family has, you know, years past have made it known to their young children coming up, you know, Black people are lazy, they don't like to do this. Just a whole, array of definitions, untrue definitions. And then through our experiences, and then as each generation passed, we got angrier and angrier, and we started saying the same thing about the white people. You understand? And so now we're at a pivotal point. You know, we're at the crossroads now where we need to stop this, you know, but we need to start with our family. I had a young lady who saw the documentary, and I was speaking at a predominantly white church, and this white female got up and she said that she used to be a racist until she saw the documentary, and so she heard about the forgiveness. And she said she repented of racism. And she said the reason, what happened was in her struggle, she was taught this as a young white girl growing up, starting from her great-great-grandfather to her present parents. And then when she got old enough to realize it was wrong, then she had this peer pressure from people on the job, from her own white race. And so it was too difficult for her to do it until that particular time. When she saw the documentary and she heard about the forgiveness, is when she made a bold move to repent of racism. She had her two boys there. One was 7, one was 10. She said she brought them there so that they could begin to learn something different from what she learned. And that was she said that was no longer going to be a legacy in their family about how they thought about Black people. The legacy was going to be that we can't be racist. And so this is what I'm telling you. You have to begin in your family, because that's where it began. It began in the family. And from there, we can make a difference.
So Reverend Thompson, actually, it's an interesting point. And I mean, I can answer to all three of you about this film. And you talked about the way people kind of connect with it, and then it makes them want to do something different. So my question is it that the film centers this issue of forgiveness, and then that people are feeling like, oh, I might be forgiven too, and so therefore I can step into this? Or is it about the horror of the event that people are so appalled that they want to step into this?
Well, first of all, it was about the horror of the event. People in Charleston, I'm going to start with Charleston. People in Charleston particularly began to look at do a self-examination. The white people began to do a self-examination, and they felt some guilt about what happened here, because they may not have been the one to actually made Dylan do what he did, but they felt like they were a part of it because of the way they felt. They felt almost like he felt, not to kill Black people, but they felt that they had some discrimination, some racism in their hearts concerning us, and so the horror is what brought the reality to just how terrible, you understand, how terrible it is to even feel that way about a certain group of people. And through that horror, people began to do a self-examination. And then not only that, as the documentary began to travel from state to state, and people saw the forgiveness and act, people began to realize that they themselves, when it comes to forgiveness, they themselves was carrying some baggage, and causing some disturbances, maybe in their own community or maybe in their own family life, in terms of hatred brought about what may have happened to them. Because Dylan's reasoning for this was that the Black men were raping all the Black women. I don't know what history book he read, but the Black men were raping all the Black women, and the Black men were taking all the jobs, And so this was his baggage. But in order to get relief from that, he decided to kill Black people. And so the opposite effect came later with those whites who felt almost the same way, but instead of trying to kill somebody, they felt like, they needed to bow down. They needed to ask for forgiveness for being a racist. They needed to ask for forgiveness for feeling the way they felt towards us. And that brought about a change of heart. That brought about a lot of change of heart in Charleston community as well. I mean, I went around speaking about forgiveness, and I've actually had people come to tell me these things. I had a 99-year-old lady at a First Baptist Church in Charleston, which is the First Baptist Church in America, and we were talking about forgiveness, and she said she learned something. I said, what did she learn? She said she learned she was a racist. And I'm like, 99 years old, and you thinking you just realized that? But the point I'm trying to make is that she didn't realize she was. She just didn't realize she was, because of what she was taught something that she carried with her all her life, even to being that, and she felt like everything she was doing, the way she felt about it was okay, because she never did any harm to Black people, And so all this came out from the documentary and from the Speaking of Forgiveness. It just came out. I mean, I can't give you a specific reason why, but people, these were the response I received from people time and time again. So forgiveness as a whole is the key to healing a family, a church, community, and a nation. I mean, that's just what it does. You know, and this documentary shows that, and this documentary promotes that, you know, and it helps people to do a self-examination, you know, because they see where it will take them and will bring them together rather than separate them. And so it's doing what God put it out there to do, believe me.
I wanted to key off of a couple of things Reverend Thompson said. You know, as much as forgiveness is a component of this conversation and the film, in many ways, it's been the quote unquote F word in our movie. In some cases, it makes it very hard to get this movie seen or accepted or to really resonate, because there are many people that feel like, oh, forgiveness came too easy, it comes too fast, you can't forgive in order to affect change, there can't be. And what's interesting, I think Dimas alluded to it earlier, each of us is shaped uniquely and different. And some of us need to forgive, some of us need to be forgiven. Some of us need to speak up and stand up, but each of us has something that we can do or should do. And so the question again comes back, what can I do? And that's what the film really did for me when you asked about lessons earlier. I see people using their gifts to make a difference during this time. We've got a global pandemic, so we're all shut down. You're either having cocktails over the fence with your neighbor watching the sunset over the ocean, or you're doing something to make a difference. The question is, you've got to ask yourself, what can I do? And it starts, as Reverend Thompson said, with your family. But there are people a part of this story. Everyone on this call, you had Dimas, who was a first responder. You had Reverend Anthony, who was a reluctant hero that was drawn into this of no desire of his own and lost his wife. You have investors, one of them an MIT alum named Todd Cooper, who's on this call, who wrote a check to make this movie, to tell this story, so that another guy could see it and say, I want to bring my church together and host a screening and have a debate. So another guy could say, we're going to do something with the MIT alumni on a Zoom call. This is how change starts to happen. And it takes all of us doing our part. We're all part of this body. I do have a connection to South Carolina. I do have a connection to Reverend Anthony Thompson, and so do you. This is our country. These are our people that are dying and suffering. We can all make a difference. What that looks like, I'm not as a filmmaker here to tell you. I just know what I had to do is I know how to make a movie. I don't know what to do with it afterwards. I don't know how to get it out, but some good people at MIT said, you should talk to Carney. What's Carney? Oh, they're a consulting firm. They're going to help with an externship to create new venues and opportunities to get this movie out. And some guys from Wharton and some guys from MIT and Harvard, people that are much smarter, higher pay grade than I, donating their time. And I used to call it pro bono, which I thought meant for free. Pro bono means for good, pro bono. And I look at this film as
I think we lost John there for a minute.
Right in the middle of brilliant thoughts, we lose our speakers.
Right in the middle of brilliant thoughts. Well, while we're waiting for him, maybe there's a couple of questions in the chat that I'd like to kind of bring up, if that's okay. And there are two of them that are related. One from John and one from Paulette. So let me read them because I think reading them is good. So from John, have you heard from the white evangelical community? They have been quite vocal in their support for outgoing President Trump. I am asking if any of the prominent evangelicals have reached out to you, Reverend Thompson, or the filmmakers to express support or allyship. And then let me give you the second one because it's related. Forgiveness and truth are demonstrated by the people of Emanuel and Charleston. How have white evangelicals and other white Christians responded? I love the individual and anecdotal stories, but given the racist history of Southern Baptists and others, are they becoming anti-racist?
I would say in small support, in the sense, I think one of the things at first we had was a huge critique, which was interesting. People were upset that we showed the truth that when a cop went to arrest Dylan Roof, that he put his gun away. And, you know, times have changed in very quick moments. But a year ago, a lot of white people that I knew, the minute you said the word, a cop did something wrong, it was like something just turned off where they could not, it couldn't be said, it couldn't be heard. It was like the holy throne or something. And that was really unfortunate. So a lot of people complained about that. Why is that scene in there? It's kind of divisive. I really liked the film until I saw the moment about cops or any issue. And when we made the film as filmmakers, we went through cut after cut after cut, saying, how could we go down this middle path where we're telling truth, but we're not trying to lean to the right or lean to the left? And to be brutally honest, I had no idea how many films are driving agenda, like driving, look at me, I'm taking the car hard right, and this is where I'm gonna be, or I'm taking it hard left. So when it goes down this middle path as best we can, as humanly possible, because we all lean a little bit, but making that attempt by wrestling to go down that path, it was hard to please everyone. It was the forgiveness offended a lot of people on the liberal side. Like, I want to be mad, I want to be angry, I want to deal with this stuff. And it offended a lot of people on the right side that said, but you showed cops doing something wrong. You showed this, you know. But the part that brought everyone together was the forgiveness and walking through the history. I think that wasn't mentioned, but walking through the history of racism and the history of Charleston and where it led to today in that moment in time where we're still dealing with, I think that helped a lot of people say, wow, okay. But I think it's getting better, but we have a long way to go. And there's a very strong white evangelical presence that, you know, we love and we pray for.
What Pastor Dimas said in reference to the history that the documentary showed, that was powerful. That was one of the most powerful points in the whole documentary. I mean, to show where Charleston, where the slavery was at from that point to where we are, to where we were at that present time when the documentary was made. And that had a profound effect, oh my God, in Charleston, South Carolina, on the lives of many people who didn't know about that history, people who kind of had an idea, wasn't sure, you know, and then people who know that their families, you know, because Charleston was the port for slaves coming in. For 200 years, slaves worked and the white man profited off the backs of slavery right here in Charleston, which made the city rich as it is today. And so it was a lot of those people whose children saw it and saying, wow, knowing that their parent, their grandfather or great-great-grandfather has something to do with that. And so that, showing that historical part, you know, the slavery part of Charleston to present day was very powerful and brilliant, I thought, because I was surprised to even see it there myself, because I didn't know everything that they were doing in the documentary till it was completed. But it put people, as particularly the churches. I heard you, Dr. McDowell, ask something about the churches and white evangelicals. Well, like Pastor Dimas said, we pray for them. We're praying for those evangelicals, believe it or not, and no animosity, no anger, just wonderment. You know, because we are all pastors, we are all Christians, and it's, you know, as a pastor preaching on the pulpit that I preach on, I definitely do not get up there and preach black and white, or black or white. you know, but I preach God and try to lead people towards God. And that's what's happening right now as a result of the documentary in the city of Charleston. We are exchanging pulpits. We have the St. Michael's Church was an Anglican church, predominantly white, south of Broad. When I say south of Broad, you're talking about an area in Charleston where all the rich white people live, okay? Where all the old Charleston money is that was a result of slavery, okay? You have St. Michael's Church. You have First Baptist Church, south of Broad, okay? You have First Scots Presbyterian Church, south of Broad. You have St. John Lutheran Church, south of Broad. And then you have my church. All these churches are predominantly white. Then you have my church, predominantly black, which is not south of Broad. But we have come together. We have come together. We're exchanging pulpits. Okay, our members, I mean, we exchange pulpits so many times, it's almost like we're all one church now. And this is the result of the documentary. You know, these churches came together, they came to me and said, you know, we want to do something. What can we do? And so we began to have Lent service every year, a Lent service. We have a Lent service together, we exchange pulpits, and after the service, we have a feast, and we tell our congregation, and all the congregations from these churches come together at one church, and we tell our members to sit by somebody from another congregation, you know, and get to know each other. And it's been going on now since the documentary. It's been going on since that time, okay? And we have come to know each other like, I mean, like some of my members are calling members of these other churches, they're friends now. It's like, how your children doing? You know, what are y'all doing over there? We're going to come and help y'all, and vice versa. So these are the kind of changes that have occurred as a result of that documentary, because people were able, white people and black people were able to see, okay, where the slavery that took place in Charleston, you know, up to the present time, to that Emanuel tragedy, and begin to realize that, man, you know, I mean, started some feeling guilty, okay, and some, and so this is where the forgiveness coming at, and this is where the change of heart coming at, because people are saying, you know what, I may not have been a part of that, but experiencing white privilege, you know, I am receiving the benefits of slavery, so now I need to do something about this, you see. And so the documentary brought all that out, and that's why I said the part about the history of Charleston and slavery was brilliant, and was the foundation of the change that came about, you know. And so that's what it's doing. I mean, we're doing that right now. I mean, I am meeting with those 4 churches that you're talking about, and we're going to be meeting with 300 or 400 other churches now, where the next movement is called One New Humanity Charleston. Okay, One New Humanity Charleston, which brothers, producers, we're going to be stealing a little few things out of that documentary, okay, to put this in, to put it into what we're doing, you know. And
go ahead, it's your film.
Okay, it's going to become a film too, but it's going to is based on reconciliation, repentance, forgiveness, and unity in the city of Charleston. It's going to be an annual event, to the point that it's not going to just be an annual event, but we're making it an organization consisting of board members and people with certain positions, so that it can be a continuous thing. All that, I'm telling you, all that is a result of that documentary. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to just add one other thing, because I just came in. Sorry, you lost me before. I'll try and stay connected. When you talked about the question about the white evangelical community, because that's probably, quote unquote, my people. I grew up in Wheaton, Illinois. So, you know, it's the hotbed of evangelical Christianity. I came out to Hollywood and I thought I was going to be excommunicated, but you know, God's got people everywhere, doesn't he? And, you know, the people that finance this film, I would say probably predominantly are white evangelicals, people that, again, felt like we want to do something. Some of the greatest response we've had have been in churches in Wheaton, churches in Wilmette, outside of Chicago, Glen Ellen. And I think when the George Floyd tragedy happened, the murder, it was interesting. I got a phone call from all these usually very tough, hostile Hollywood types that are not people necessarily of faith, but they said, in light of what's happening and in light of what's going on in our country, we want to take this film and make it available for free to anybody who wants to see it. Would you be okay with this? This was Comcast, who has 22 million subscribers, NBC Universal, a competitor, and Starz, another competitor, who all came together and called us and filmmakers and said, we want to help facilitate discussion here. And some of these people are members of Black congregations, but many of them are members of white Protestant organizations or evangelical church. It was people coming together going, we're all in it's a boat that we're all in, and it's a big boat. We got to do something. Here's what we can do. So what they did was give our film away for free, but at least they got it out there to people who need to see it, people sitting home on Netflix and such. And so that's our job. Each one of us on this call may have a connection to a civic organization or a faith organization or a synagogue. I mean, the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, I think it was, had a shooting, and they have a connection now to Charleston and the First AME, and have had discussion and unfortunately have a common bond in this kind of tragedy. But consequently, the film has played in Jewish synagogues. So we're seeing people come together because it's a bigger issue than white or Black, as Anthony said, bigger than white evangelicals or Kojic or AME. It's a heart problem we got in this country, and we all got to look at our own hearts and ask God to search them, right? Do what we can.
I don't know how y'all gonna close it out. We got 2 minutes, but I'll pass it over to you guys.
Go for it, Joe.
Ceasar, any closing remarks? Really thankful to everyone for joining us today. That's the film is Emanuel. Visit emmanuelmovie.com. Learn more about it. Share with your friends. Be inspired and moved, I hope, as we all are by it. Dimas, Salaberrios, John Shepard, producers, Reverend Anthony Thompson of Charleston, South Carolina, Professor Ceasar McDowell from MIT. Thank you so much for joining us today, sharing some of this really good discussion, really only the tip of the iceberg. We'll be sure to forward all questions, comments to the panel today. We'll keep the chat window open if people have messages or discussion in the chat for another 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say we have our next film coming out is called Chicago, America's Hidden War. That's due to hit the theaters in January 15th. And we'd love for you all to be a part, check it out as long as coronavirus allows in your area. But it's Chicago, America's Hidden War, and it's a very, very deep, profound film on the issues that's going on with the killings in Chicago and how many groups are responding to it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me just say that also, we all carry baggage. Sometimes it's hard to get rid of that baggage. And that's what brought me, the documentary, along with everything, brought me to write the book Called to Forgive. Called to Forgive is a book that will help you get rid of your baggage and your burdens, will help you to learn how to forgive somebody, and will also show you that the way to peace is through forgiveness. So you get a chance, look it up, BethanyHouse.com, Books of Millions, all local bookstores, Called to Forgive.
Thank you. Other ideas, feedback, topics for or speakers you'd like to suggest for our Forum for Equity, please email us alumnilearn@mit.edu. And a reminder that we'll post an archive to this video. Please share among your community. It'll be on the MIT Alumni Association YouTube channel within a week of today. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.